lifted up, Lord, come and quench this thirsting in my soul. Bread from heaven, feed me till I want no. Well, hello. What brings you to the well today? Passing through? On your way to Jerusalem? Oh, I see. You're looking for Jesus. Well, you know, he was by here, right at this well, just a few weeks ago. In fact, I met him here at the well. Why don't you have a seat? And let me pour you a drink of cool water from this well. And I'll tell you about the day I met Jesus. I had come late to the well that day, and I know what you're thinking. Like, why would anybody in their right mind come to draw water from a 150-foot well in the heat of the day? But you see, I wanted to avoid the ladies of my town. Their glares, their stares, their very unkind words. I wasn't very well liked back then. But anyway, there he was, sitting at the well. It was hot, the sun beating on his forehead. Thirsty. He was obviously thirsty, and I would have gladly offered him a drink of water. But I am a woman and a Samaritan. I didn't dare. Any act of kindness on my part would have been considered an insult. So instead, I veiled my face and went about my business. But then I heard a voice. He was talking to me. And I looked up. He was looking at me. "Give me a drink," he said, just like that. "Give me a drink. You have water. I am thirsty. Give me a drink." Well, it took me a couple of minutes to recover from the shock. This man had just jumped 2 social barriers the size of the Grand Canyon. Anyway, I started to think, who was this man? I had to find out. Well, as you can tell, I'm not very shy, so I just went ahead and asked him as I poured him a drink of water. I said, "How come you, a man, are asking a favor of me, a woman? You, a Jew, talking to me, a Samaritan?" And he smiled, as if pleased with my question, and thus began our conversation. He told me everything about my life, including my husband's. You see, I was very lonely back then. You could say I was searching for love in all the wrong places. But it's as, I don't know how he knew, but it's as if he had known me all my life. Well, we talked about God, we talked about worship, we talked about things close to his heart and things close to mine. And the more we talked, that empty place in my heart, you know that hole that I'm talking about. You all have it too. That hole that you try to fill with everything this world has to offer, but that never satisfies. Yep, that one. That's the hole in my heart that was finally being filled. My thirsting soul was finally being quenched. The more we talked, the more I began to think, this is no ordinary man. This is no ordinary prophet. Could it be? Could he be the? Well, there are some things you just don't go right up and ask someone like, "Hi, it's been nice talking to you, but by the way, are you the Messiah?" So I went about it in a roundabout way. "Rabboni," I said, "the scriptures say that when Messiah comes, He will explain everything to us. Okay, ladies, now hang on to your veils because you're not going to believe what he said next. He said, I that speak unto you am he. I that speak unto you am he. Not the I that resurrects the dead, or the I that walks on water, or the I that heals the sick, but the I that crosses all boundaries between males and females, between races and cultures. That is the I that is the Messiah. My heart was filled with joy. But before I could speak, the disciples had come back. And soon I was surrounded by a swarm of angry Jewish males. I knew what I was supposed to do: veil my face and take my jar and run as fast as I could back to my town. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. I had just spent the last hour at the feet of Jesus. I had drank the living water. I too was now a disciple. So instead, I looked up into the face of Jesus, and he gave me this imperceptible nod. And I knew exactly what I had to do. I left my jar, and I ran as fast as I could back to my hometown, the city of Sychar. And there, the first person I met was an elder of the community. And I said to him, he's here, he's here. It could be no other. Come and see the Messiah, the one who told me everything about my life. You have to come. No, not just you. We have to tell everyone. So I ran down every street in that town, and I knocked on every door. And again, and over again, I told my story about how I had met Jesus and what he had said to me. Before I knew it, I had the entire city of Sychar walking behind me back to the well to meet Jesus. And as we walked, this dread all of a sudden came into my heart. What if he wasn't there? What if he had given up on me and he abandoned me? It had been several hours. Maybe he wouldn't be there anymore. But I could see him in the distance. He was there waiting for me, waiting to see who I'd bring back with me. And once again, I sat at the feet of Jesus. And when he saw the entire city of Sychar walking behind me, yes, every man, woman, and child, and household pet, he threw his head back in the air, and laughter filled the sky. And yes, once again, I sat at the feet of Jesus, but this time I was surrounded by happy people. People that were all longing to get a glimpse of Jesus, wanting to see him, wanting to hear him, wanting to touch them, wanting Jesus to notice them. Well, I introduced each and every one of them by name to Jesus, and he touched every hand, and he looked at every face, and he touched every heart. I don't know when I'm going to see Jesus again. It might not be until that kingdom, the kingdom of spirit and truth he talked to me so much about. But until that day comes, I'm going to tell every single soul that I come in contact with about him, the quencher of all thirst. And when that glorious day comes, I'm going to take my jar. I'm going to fill it to the rim with cool, clear water. And I'm going to bust through the crowd and go to Jesus and say, remember me? I have some more friends I'd like you to meet, Jesus.
Say sometimes that a parable, a word picture is worth 1,000 words. And, many times it's easy to get up here and to talk, right? But I want you to remember something, because 9 times out of 10, you don't remember what anybody said later on. You will probably forget almost every detail that I've said, but you might remember a general theme, or maybe the way it made you feel, or the way you were impressed by a story, like my wife's story, what she said. And that's why I want to talk to you today about the American dream, because in the American dream is one of the root causes of what's happening in our church today. And I want to play it out for you in a real picture. I really want to tell you all about it so that maybe you'll remember it. And our young people will remember it. I wish there was more young people to remember it, but adults too. So I'm going to start off. I'm just going to ask God to lead. Father, I just ask that you will speak to me, speak through me, Lord, that your will be done, and that the impressions that you leave will be lasting, so that people will remember what you want them to remember. I pray this in Jesus' name, amen. Let's just go over the American dream. The American dream is a set of ideals in which freedom includes opportunity for prosperity and success, as well as an upwardly mobile social mobility for the family and children, regardless of where they were born or what class they were born into, achieved through hard work in a society with few barriers. I stand here before you today as a living example of the American dream. And can anybody tell me where this capital, where this is at right here? Does anybody have any guess where that's at? Right? Well, how about this? Can anybody tell me where this is at? Close. This was the capital of the Western Hemisphere back in the day, right? This was Havana Harbor. This was the capital of Cuba, in Havana. At one point, it was a very wealthy nation, and it's a very well-to-do nation. And this is where the story starts. And I start there because this is where the American dream starts. But first, I want to take you back to something that happened to all the history buffs, something that happened in 1898. What happened in 1898? Anybody remember? The Spanish-American War. And this was the USS what? USS Maine, right? The USS Maine was sunk in Havana Harbor, and they blamed it on somebody, right? And the Americans were drawn into the war. And it was during this time, right, that Cuba was at war with Spain, and the United States went at war with Spain, that this story develops. And why do I bring you back to that far back? This was during the war. It was during this time of the Spanish-American War, and it was during the time of the Industrial Revolution in this country, where this country was really getting prosperous, right? We were beyond the Civil War, and things were really popping, and people were making money, and doctors were really doing really well. And there was a doctor called Isaiah and his nurse, Laura Moore. And it was there, these doctors and nurse, this doctor and nurse decided to forsake their American dream and want to become missionaries for our church. And they went to the Battle Creek, place to study, to be missionaries, to go abroad as missionaries. It was during this time of the Spanish-American War that when missionaries went out into the Caribbean and different parts of the world, that they would die of diseases. And it was very common for them to die within months of landing in these foreign shores with tropical diseases. And Isaiah and Laura Moore decided to go and forsake their American dream, to land in where people needed to hear the gospel. So they forsake their dream, and here he was. This is not him. He went around and he spoke to a lot of people, and one of the people he spoke to was this gentleman on a horse here, and this gentleman's name was Juan Antonio Rubio. Juan Antonio Rubio Batista, actually, to be official. And this man was converted by Dr. Moore. Dr. Moore was living on he was self-supporting. He left his practice behind, and he was there in the front lines working with the poor Cubans and helping them during this time. And he converted this man. Well, this man went on to live to be 107 years old, and he went on to convert his son, right? His son became a very, religious man. But this man also used to go with a horse and a satchel all around town, handing out literature and converting. And started one of the first churches in the east side of Cuba, in Holguin, Cuba. His son became a follower also, and his son became a great missionary too. And it went on from generation to generation, right? All the way down to myself, right? That was my great-grandfather that became a missionary because of Dr. Moore. Dr. Moore went to Cuba, converted my great-grandfather, and now it was being passed down from my great-grandfather and father to me. And now, not only was it, but my daughter was also in Cuba preaching, and also my son was preaching in Cuba, And now we're going to Cuba again now too. But also, it goes to show you the effect of one person, that when they dedicate their lives to God and they forsake the things of this world and they put God first, the effect that they can have. Dr. Moore would not imagine that I would be here today. And the number of people, generations of my family, of people that we have worked with, hundreds, if not thousands of people that have been led to the Lord with this vast family that by one decision that he made, with the effect that he had. And this can be your decision too. It says John 4:17, and it goes on to say, we read the verse, but I'm going to read verse 12. It says, "Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it, and as well as his sons and his livestock?" And Jesus answered and said unto her, "Whoever drinks of this will thirst again, but whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst again. But the water that I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water springing up into everlasting life." You see, the water that the Samaritan woman had was pretty good water. That water come from a long lineage, and it was important water. And she was very proud of that water, right? As an average person would be. That was good water. She said, "Drink of this water." But Jesus says, if you keep on drinking of that water, what's going to happen? You're going to continue being thirsty again. So this is where my story starts, in the island of Cuba. And it was there in the 1960s when Castro took over, 1960, Castro took over. There was great turmoil during that time, and our family fled persecution. In 1950, 1960, around 1970, our family finally left. And we left Cuba, and we ended up in the shores of the Golden State of California. It was there in the Golden States of California that we were able to bring one toy with us. Once a year, the communist government will let you have one toy. And I, got this little brown teddy bear right here. See this little brown teddy bear? I brought it with me under my arm. I have a picture actually at home with this little brown teddy bear. But my brother, right, had this golden teddy bear. My older brother had the big teddy bear. And it goes to show you, I want to start the story by saying that you never have enough. You always want something that you don't have. You always want more because you're never satisfied with what you have, right? You're thirsty. Your water, remember, you're thirsty. You want more, right? So at a young age, it was built in that I wanted more already. So there we were, a happy family in the shores of California, and before you know it, life happens, and the family broke up, and my mom and my three brothers, we were on our own. Poor as can be, my dad moved on. Long story. So we were there at the age of 8 years of age, right? On the shores of California. She was educated, but she was broke. And she had to work. She went to work every day. And she worked at a fishing pole factory, at a shoe factory, making about $2 an hour. And I would stay home, and I'd watch TV. But she was a very godly woman, but she had to work. So as I was left at home, and I come home from school and had to be by myself, I'd watch a lot of TV. And guess what happens when you watch a lot of media? Do you think things start filling your brain about what's right and what's wrong? And slowly but slowly, it was starting to infiltrate, what this world had to offer, right? And before you know it, there I was. And I remember one day I was at the grocery store with my mother, and I was about 12 years old. And I didn't really know what this was, but my mother whipped one of these out, and I was at the grocery store line. And I said, "Mom, what is this? What is this weird-looking bill?" She said, "Son, she said, these are food stamps." I said, "Well, Mom, what are food stamps?" She said, "Yeah, that's for the poor people." And at that time, it hit me so hard. I'll never forget it. I said, "Mom, as long as I live, you'll never be poor. I'm going to make it for you. And I'm going to work hard." I could not stand to see my mother suffer. So I said, I'm going to make it. I'm going to make the American dream. And it started very innocently, very subtly, beautifully. It can start. Your dreams can start for good reasons. You want to make it in the American dream. And there I was, at 13 years of age, I bought my neighbor's car. My brothers were car guys. I told you this was a car. I had a lot of car stuff today. You're going to hear it. I bought my first car. It was my only way, and I had saved $50, and I bought my neighbor's car for $50. And I took it, and I cleaned it up a little bit, and I sold it for $200. And I had made a lot of money. I said, wow, God is really blessed, and he blessed our family. It was a good thing, you know? And I sold it to my brother, and then he sold it to a neighbor for $400, you know? And so we were doing good. I was already starting, hey, this is a good thing I can get into. Maybe I can get ahead this way, you know? And there was, at the age of 13 and a half, 14, I bought my second car, right? And I bought a 71 Dodge Charger at the age of 14. And at the age of 14, with those $200, I started working, and I started working on cars, and I started sanding cars and painting them and changing the oil on the cars. And I said, I got to hustle. I got to make it, you know? And at the age of 14, 15 years of age, I started doing body work at the house. And before you know it, the people at church felt sorry for us, and they would send us their cars, and we would sand them, you know, as best as we could. We paint them out in the driveway. Look, it's orange on the bottom there. We would paint in the driveway with the bugs and sand the bugs off, but God was blessing, and we were making money. And that was actually my Mustang at that time. I had actually made enough money doing work at home that I had a Mustang convertible at the age of 15. And I was doing pretty good, and there I was doing some other cars, a 67 Mustang Fastback. There was newspaper. I was just trying to hustle and trying to make the American dream. A good thing? Would you say it's a good thing? It's good to work. It's good to get ahead, right? But the devil doesn't rest. And there was in the backyard, you know, customers' cars would give me, and I'd tape them up, and I'd stand them, and I'd spray them. And there's another happy customer, you know, with another happy Cadillac looking really pretty. I got really good. The God was blessing. And I was doing really, really, really good. And before you know it, at the age of 16 and a half, I was able to buy myself a Trans Am. And I thought, I was like one of the only kids in high school that had a Trans Am. I mean, I bought my own Trans Am. This is back in the day. This is a big deal. And I bought it with my own money. And I thought, I have arrived now. I am the cat's meow. You know, I have achieved the American dream. And I was happy. And I was doing good. But then another car came out. It was a movie called Phantasm, you know, and it was another cool car that came out. It was called a 1971 Plymouth Cuda 440 six-pack. And this is a very rare car. For those of you guys, I'm going to talk some technical terms. Now, I want to just take a pause for just a second. I am talking today about cars, but I want you to think about your own life and think about people that you know. Everybody has their thing that they're into. For me, it was cars. But for some people, they get into some hobby, or they get into some sport, or to some career, or to some type of lifestyle, that little by little, they get more into it, and you get sucked into it, and it's never enough. So I'm going to continue in the story, but I want you to apply this story that I'm saying to possibly your own life and the life of those that you know. So this car came out, and this car was a rare car. The Trans Am wasn't good enough. So I said to myself, this car has 3 carburetors. It's a six-pack on the hood. It's rarer than hen's teeth. I said, I want one of those, you know. And believe it or not, at the age of 16, 17, I had one in my driveway. I couldn't believe it, you know. And then that wasn't good enough, you know, because I saw some friends that were racing at the local drag strip, and they had an engine called the 426 Hemi. The Hemi, you know, you guys know in the South, right? It was the engine. When you look at top fuel dragsters and all the big drag cars, that's the engine that they use. This was the engine to have. This was the car to have. And so I sold my regular street car, and I said, if I buy a racing car and I race it, I'm going to really be happy. And so I bought the car, and I ran it down the drag strip a bunch of times, and, you know, after a while, it didn't have air conditioning. But I was happy with it, you know, but it didn't have air conditioning. But then, and something else came out. You guys remember Richard Petty? Richard Petty? You remember Richard Petty, right? And back in the 70s, there came a car. This was the first car to ever do 200 miles an hour at NASCAR. And I had, you know, a Mustang convertible, a Trans Am, a Cuda, then a Hemi Cuda for the drag strip. I thought I was it. That was it. I couldn't be any happier. But when I saw this car, I said to myself, I need to have one of these. Have you ever seen one of these on the road with a big wing? These are really rare. They sell for a lot of money. You're not going to believe how much money these things sell for. But at the age of 17 and a half, I had one. I bought myself one, right? And I had a Plymouth Super. These are rare. These are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars now, depending on which one it is, which engine that it has. And I had one. You would think I have achieved the American dream. Now, let's not lose track why I'm saying this. There's a reason this applies to the church, and you're going to understand. So here's one that sold for this is a nice one that sold for $3 million. So these were really the cars. But then a movie came out, right? You guys remember the movie that came out? And he was cool. Smoking the Bandit with Burt Reynolds was cool. And I said to myself, you know what? That Superbird is cool, but I want to be like Burt Reynolds. I need a new high, a new fix, right? And I went and I bought myself a black and gold Trans Am, like the movie did, right? And I bought a Trans Am. And that wasn't enough. Another show came out. It was called Nash Bridges, Don Johnson. Remember Miami Vice? And Don Johnson had a very, very rare car. It was the rarest. It was called the Holy Grail of all muscle cars. And I know I'm talking Chinese to some of you. But I'm going to show you that when you achieve to have this type of car, it was the ultimate muscle car in American history. Now, I know it's hard for you to believe that, but I wanted to be cool like him. And it says, there it is. It sold, this is years ago, when it sold for $3.5 million. This was the most rarest muscle car of all time, and I wanted one, because I had everything else. And I wanted the American dream. I wanted to keep on going forward. I was still a good church kid, but I still wanted to go forward and be rich and have all these things. And there I was. I couldn't afford one, for millions, but I built one from ground up. And I took time, and I found the parts, and little by little, bolt by bolt, I built me a Hemi Cuda convertible. It took everything I had, years to put it together. And I put it together, and there it was, with the rarest of all-time muscle cars I had. Actually, I had two of them eventually, over time. But, that wasn't enough. And another show was out, and it was called Magnum PI. And so this is the way sin works, right? I was doing good. I was doing good in church, but I was a little bit distracted, chasing the American dream. So when Tom Selleck came out and he had that Ferrari, I said to myself, well, you know what? I want to be cool like Tom Selleck. And I remember he grew a mustache like him, And I went out. That was back in the day, and I bought myself a Ferrari. But not only did I buy myself a Ferrari because the American dream was so good and I was doing so good, that I bought the Japanese Ferrari at the same time called the Acura NSX. This is rare. And I remember in my garage, I had an Acura NSX, a Japanese Ferrari, and I had the regular Ferrari, At the same time, I thought, I have now achieved nirvana. I will float away. Who needs Jesus to come? I have achieved the American dream, And it wasn't enough. It was kind of boring. These are kind of new modern cars. And I got back into old muscle cars with big engines. My wife drove this to work one time, And I got this big hot engine, and I souped it up. And maybe that'll stimulate something new, because it wasn't the water. I was still thirsty. I wanted more. I'll go back to classic cars, Or I go back to new cars, And I was going back and forth, a yo-yo, back and forth to cars. And then a car came out called the Corvette ZR1. And the Corvette ZR1 was the first American car to do 175 miles an hour for 24 hours straight, regular production car. And guess what? They were selling for $40,000 over sticker, and I wanted one. And you know what? I got one, right? And not only did I get one, but I got a whole bunch of other cars in my driveway. I had a whole bunch of cars at one time. At one time, I had like 25 cars at one time, at the same time. And I really was just a car crazy guy. There was nothing that I wanted that I couldn't have, because I wanted the American dream. I wanted to drink and drink and drink, and I was never thirsty. I was always thirsty. And over a period of time, you're not going to believe it, but I've had as many cars almost as Solomon had wives. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And it's a very similar story, right? Because I tried it. You name it. You name a car. You name something, and I tried it when it came to that subject. Now, I don't know where you're at in your life. You might not be doing cars, you might be doing Beanie Babies, or you might be into, some other, trinket, or flipping houses, or making millions, or whatever, whatever your fix, you need in your life, right? Satan has everybody on some special formula. He has everybody's code to their heart, and he knows what to dial up in everybody's heart to keep them distracted. Right? Chasing the American dream. So I had all that, and I was so empty. But what do you do when you're really a car fanatic? You know what? Instead of passing on, I passed it on to my kids. So there are my kids working under the car. My daughter's working under the car, teaching her everything I knew, because what do? You pass on what you know to your own kids. And my son, I'm teaching him how to work on cars. And my other daughter, I'm teaching her how to work on cars. And my other daughter, I'm teaching her how to work on cars. And they're all working on these old cars, because when you're a fanatic, new, old, whatever, you just can't get enough of it. You love it. When you're into something, it's like, I remember there were times that I would rather read the back pages of a car magazine with the ads than read my Bible. And I was still at church, but I loved it so much that I just couldn't get enough of it. I found value in all the cars, and I was just going, on and on and on. It was amazing. It had started very subtly by wanting to not see my mother poor and wanting to achieve the American dream, something very natural, very normal. But before you know it, I was consumed up in it. And I was brokenhearted, something in my heart wasn't right 100%. So I thought, maybe what I need is relationships, Maybe what I need to fix this thing is maybe cars is not doing it, Maybe what I really need to do is girls, Now, obviously, I can't talk about the subject because my wife is sitting right there, and I might walk out in a body bag, right? But I tried that area a little bit, and it was left me wanting more. It was never enough, right? Nothing could fulfill that donut-sized hole that I had in my heart. Only God could fill it. But yet I tried it. I said, if I had the right girl, I could do it, And empty. The right car, I was empty. I said, well, as a matter of fact, maybe if I get really educated, and I go out and get 4 college degrees, maybe I'll be happy. And so I tried it. I went to school, and I went to school, and I went to school, and I went to a bunch of schools around the country, and I got educated. And I remember the first time that I made, it was 6 figures right out of school, And this is not even flipping cars. This is just now educated, I said, this will be the fix that I need. What I really need is education, And so I went to school, and I graduated. I made that big money. And, there was something inside of me that said, it just quite isn't enough. There's got to be something else to it, This making money is just not enough. And so I graduated from school, and I bought a couple more Porsches, and in 2 different colors, because I still like cars, And it wasn't enough, but I was brokenhearted. And then I met some beautiful young lady that you guys might know who she is, I met her, and I said, oh, this will be it, This will be it. If I marry me, a nice pretty doctor woman, I'll be set, And, I was a good guy, don't get me wrong, but I'm going to show you how it works. I was still in church, and I was pretty good in church, but I was looking for something else. My main focus was on something other than what God really wanted for me. So I said, cars will do it, right? Relationships will do it. Money will do it. Maybe a hot wife who's a doctor, something like that will do it. No, deep down inside, it wasn't enough. Listen up to me, guys. Listen up, young people. And I was brokenhearted. And it was there that I said to myself, you know what? I'm missing a part of my American dream. I need to have a hacienda, a house, right? And I said, I need to have a nice house. And I said, I want a nice house with a gated community, and I want to live it up. We bought a fancy little McMansion, in a fancy neighborhood. And I remember the grass was so beautiful that there couldn't be no weeds in competition with the neighbors. It was just so manicured, the whole neighborhood. And little, McMahon had a multi-car garage and a pool and gated guardhouse to come into the neighborhood. And I thought that would make me happy, And yet, I was empty, And I had achieved the American dream. And if the story would stop there, it would be a story very similar to many people in this world we live in. There are many good people at church, that secretly are trying to achieve the American dream. And they don't even know it. But they think, if I just had that house, or if I had that career, or if I had that thing, whatever it is, in my life, I would be satisfied. That's what I really need in my life, you know? So I really was brokenhearted, and I cried out to the Lord, and it says, but those who drink the water I will give will never be thirsty. And I remembered that. The Lord was bringing me to my senses. I said, Lord, I've tried all these different waters, and I'm thirsty. I'm going to try you, you know? So I reached out to God, and I prayed from the bottom of my heart, and I met a missionary. I met a missionary man who was driving a $400 Honda CRX, an old clunker. But that man, when he spoke, he had stories that were like, wow, he has something that I don't have. He has an experience with God. This man is connected. He lived in a mobile home. He had a $400 car. He had nothing to his name. And yet he was on the front lines for God. And his experiences were like, wow. And I said to myself, I need what that man has. I need a relationship with God the way he does. Because it wasn't obviously the outside stuff that had him like that. So I prayed and I prayed and prayed to God. And by the grace of God, I'll never forget it, you know, that God gave me victory over stuff. I said, Lord, I'm yours. I'm 100% yours. Not 50% yours, 75% yours. I mean, I was pretty active in church. And you guys know. But at the same time, I wasn't 100% his. And things were consuming my mind and my heart. And God gave me victory over that, you know. And it was at that time that it started growing. And God was knocking on the door of my heart. And I ended up at a place called Eden Valley. By a miracle of God, I ended up living at this place, you know, this lifestyle center. The only reason I mention that is because I'm a car guy. And I remember that it was a real test of faith for me because they had like a mile dirt driveway to where I lived. And I lived in the missionary's home that was about 800 feet, and it had no air conditioning, and all 6 of us went to live there at Eden Valley, and we had nothing but dirt roads and rocks and potholes, and had a fancy car. And I said, Lord, this is painful. But it was there, because, you know, dust all over your nice car and everything. And it was there that the Lord started working on my heart. We had the best year of our life, you know, poorer than we've ever been. Totally our heart being redone completely. It was a new transformation in my life. From being self-centered to being God-centered. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the one who takes refuge in him. And it was then that I took my car skills and I opened up a car dealership. It was called Consumer First Automotive. And instead of thinking about, you know, for myself, I said, let me help the widows and the people single people that need help with cars. And I started taking my skills for God instead of for the Lord. And ever since then, we've been dedicating all the proceeds of all the cars we buy and sell, you know, to the mission field. And we've been completely rethinking the way we look at life and stuff. Now we're putting the Lord first. And ever since then, we started getting involved in mission trips. Now we started doing mission trips. Instead of just making money on my vacation time, I would start traveling and mission trips all around the world. And then we started church planting. The bug got into us and said, Lord, we want to put it all on the front line for you. And so my wife and I started working for the Lord nonstop at home. And we started just wanting to give it all on the line for God. It had changed from having my focus being on stuff and part-time God. Then I say, Lord, I am 100% yours. What do you want from me? And the Lord would tell me, here, open the door here and open the door there. And before we know it, we started church planting. We planted over 4 churches. Then we were traveling to India, working with, and that changed my heart when I started meeting people that were really poor and needy. And it completely changed my life for missions, you know, as I was traveling. And now I was speaking, you know, abroad. And before you know it, we're doing mission trips to Cuba, you know, with our young people, you know, and we're doing some more now. You know, we've started the Go Missions, you know, now that I saw earlier, we started Go Missions. God impresses. Put your energy on my things, not on building bigger and bigger things where rust and moth, you know, destroy. Put your focus on what's really important. So now we're involved with Go Missions, and we're really, really busy with that ministry. And now I work for the Life Med Center, right? I gave up a job. I gave up a job, my career is a cardiovascular perfusionist. I gave up a job working in a very nice place, making $300,000 a year to make Walmart money, with this job. But now I am happier than I've ever been because now I'm working full-time for the Lord. Now I work for the conference. As many of you know, I make peanuts, and I do this job on the side, and I still keep my medical skills around a little bit because that money goes to the mission field. But now I'm really living. I'm thinking about other people first. And instead of looking for the American dream, now I'm living for God. Now, I do want to say this. I want to give you an example of how it really works when you really put your life in God's hands. Because you need examples. There's very few times you go to church and you listen to examples of people really on the front lines for God, really doing it. So we know the story of the servant girl that Naaman had. And Naaman was very sick. But the little servant girl said, what can I do for Naaman? But I know where you can get help, And he spoke, and she spoke up, and she helped Naaman. And I said to the Lord, I really love you, but all I am is a cardiovascular perfusionist. I work in heart surgery where the people, it's like a factory line. People go by, you don't see their faces, and I don't get a chance to really share my faith with anybody. And it's just a job. I said, I really, really want to be in the front lines for you, and I want to dedicate my career as a cardiovascular perfusionist, right? I want to dedicate it to serving you. And that's all I have. Here are my loaves and fishes. I'm going to give you my career. The last thing I could hold on to, I'm going to give it to you. And it was there, in heart surgery, right, that I started working with patients. And I was called by the miracle of miracles. It's too much of a story. I ended up out west working. See, 99.9% of all perfusionists work in the open heart room in surgery. But by the grace of God, after I did that prayer, God took me to work in a few places in the country. They have a full-time perfusionist in the ICU. So instead of having to go to the mission field in Africa, right, I was able to use my career in the mission field in my own work. I was able to work with patients one-on-one. And so God took my heart's desire to serve him, and he was able to take what I had and use it. It would have never happened otherwise. And I want to give you guys a story, and I'm dealing with a lot of patients. I'm working with patients nonstop. Stories are just amazing. I could write a book on how God is doing miracle after miracle and conversions after conversions. It's too much to say. And here I am in Africa, working in Africa recently, but I want to talk about one patient because I want to close it with one patient. You see, because when you decide to leave the American dream behind, and I'm talking to the young people, when you decide to put God first in your life, there's nothing that God can't do with you when you really surrender your life to him. We kind of limit ourselves. We'll go to church, we'll participate in church, and and we kind of go through the routine. But I said, Lord, I'm 100% yours. I want to be used by you. And when I go into work, Lord, wherever you send me, I am your special forces. Use me. This job, you gave it to me. They can fire me. I'm yours, And I go in that way to work, when I go to work, and I pray. And so I had one patient who was a doctor's wife. And the guy was a pediatrician, very much like my wife, but she was a Muslim lady. And she had everything that could ever happen to her wrong with her. She had a heart attack, and her heart now, she had a 5 to 10% EF for the doctors here in the house. And her heart was beating almost like a mashed potato. There was nothing there. And her brain was mush because she had been down for too long, too much CPR. And her kidneys were on dialysis, and she was on ECMO. And she was on every form of life support known to mankind. As a matter of fact, she was so bad, right, that there was nothing left to do to her. They were going to unplug her. And this is the number one transplant place. They can transplant everybody. But this lady was untouchable. They said, there's nothing we can do with this lady. But as I was there that night, and it was one of my last nights because I would go for a week at a time, I said, Lord, I'm always yours. And I had worked with that family all week long in the ICU. And they were a Muslim family, and they had 2 beautiful girls, like my girls, and I was connecting with them. And I was connecting with the husband that was a pediatrician like my wife. And I was really connecting with them. I said, Lord, do you have something for this Muslim family? How could this lady die and them not know you? They're going to leave here, and they'll never know the God that I know. Do you have something for them? Can you please do a miracle for them? And God told me, I want you to get up and I want you to go across that ICU and go into that room. And I want you to know this. At that moment, the whole family was outside with the turbans and the whole thing. The imam had come in to give the last rites to the patient, and there he is. I took a picture. They never take a picture. This is a real picture. And I took a picture of the guy because nobody would believe the story. And in this story, I got rights from the family, okay with the family. And I took a picture of the imam giving the last rites to the Muslim lady because I know that God impressed me to do this. And so I go in, and as that Muslim man is giving the last rites to that lady, God says, go and speak to the family. And I went and I spoke to the family and I said, listen, we've been together for a long time. I really care about you, but I want you to know the God that I serve. You know, I want you to really get to know him. I think that God can do a miracle in your life. So I got up close to them and I said, if you'll allow me, I'd like to pray for your wife or your mother, that God would do a miracle and heal her. And the family's outside the operating room waiting. I'm the one that turns the machine off. And they die on the spot. And the family said, now remember, if I speak my faith, I can get fired, especially like this. But it doesn't matter because I'm God's special forces. And you can be too if you put it all on the line for God. So I went and I spoke to the family and I said, please. And the guy said, no, this is crazy. I said, and the daughter said, oh, come on, Dad, what do we got to lose? You know, he says, all right. We believe in the same God, Allah. And at that moment, I said to myself, God impressed me. I would have never said this. I said, no, it's not going to be Allah that's going to heal him. It's going to be Jesus. And as a matter of fact, we're going to do it this way. If God heals her, she has to tell everybody that Jesus is the one that healed her. The whole family and her life depends upon it. Because remember the story? I told her a story about Hezekiah. And the dad's eyes got really big, and the daughters who knew me said, yeah, let's do it, you know? Let's do it. Let's try it, Dad. And I said to myself, Lord, this would be the biggest miracle. And I went, I told the doctor that was staying, the attending doctors, and I told you pictures of them just a second ago there, you know? Here they are, you know, talking about it, right? Talking about, and it's the dad, talking about the death. And they said, this is crazy, but we know you for so long, we're going to give it a try, you know? And I said, I want you to pay attention to what's going to happen. The doctors almost laughed at me. I said, I just prayed for this family, but I want you to take note of this moment, so when it happens, you know that God is real in your life. And these are the doctors in California who are atheists. And so I walked out of the room, you know, and we prayed and walked out of the room. And about half hour later, you know, as I'm getting ready to leave, because I got to come back home to Tennessee, the lady develops a blood pressure, and now she's got a pulse. And before you know it, you know, she's spontaneous breathing on her own. And before you know it, I called back when I got back the next day, the lady's been weaned off the vent, she's breathing. And before you know it, she's conscious. And before you know it, she's left the ICU, and I'm back the following week to work. I come back to the hospital, and when I come back to the hospital, I come and I find out where she's at, and she's in the room ready to leave. But she's sleeping. But I said, I want to see her, you know? I want to remind her. And so I nudge her, and I wake her up, and I tell her, hey, hi, you doing? This is Mike. He said, oh, Mike, I remember. You're the guy that prayed for me. I said, don't forget the deal we made. Don't forget that you have to tell everybody that Jesus healed you. And she said, oh, yeah, you're right. And this is crazy. To tell a Muslim woman that she's got to tell everybody that it's Jesus and your life depends upon it. She says, no problem. And I said bye to her, you know, and she left, and happy ever after. I remember I sent them a clear word. I sent them some Bible studies. They were reading. Things were going great. And about 3 months later, I get a phone call. And I usually don't say this part of the story, but I'll tell you anyway. And about 3 months later, I got a phone call, and the daughter says, Mike, you won't believe what happened. I said, what happened? I said, my mother just died. I said, what happened? She says, well, she stopped telling people that Jesus healed her, you know. Now, here's the reason I tell you that story. The reason I tell you that story is because I could have been caught up buying and selling cars with a big car dealership, multiple car dealerships, building subdivisions like we were getting into. I could have been caught up in the things of this world and been just a regular, average guy attending church. But because I realized, and the Lord, through His Holy Spirit, had mercy and grace on me and let me run. Like you put a dog on a chain, you let him run for a while, but then the chain kind of catches him. The Lord had me after a while and said, enough is enough. You've been running, trying to figure this out on your own, but what you really need to fill that hole in your heart is me. And it wasn't until I gave God the right to the key to my heart that God started working on my heart. And if you're a young person listening to me today, and if you're an older person listening to me today, I don't know where you're in your experience, but God is still in the business of changing hearts. Because the church as it is right now It's kind of going through the motions. But when you have completely surrendered your life to God, the things that will happen in each person here individually, you will see the results. You're going to start the church, you're going to start bringing in people. You're going to have stories. You're going to have testimony time that's going to be amazing because you've decided to put God first and let the American dream, step aside. Here's the Muslim family. And it says, taste and see the Lord is good. Blessed is the one who takes refuge in him. And instead of programs, instead of people telling you what to do, you're going to say to yourself, I am a one-man army for God. God lives in me, and I'm going to share my faith no matter what. To death do us part. I can stand here and do no other because God is living in you. And you have to make the decision. God gives you the freedom of choice. He's giving you this little parable today. So you'll remember. You'll remember all the details. But if you allow God can do crazy, amazing things in your life. And you're going to live a life so exciting that nothing in this earth will ever be able to fill you unless you put God first that way. You're going to be touched by God. And the question is, as the piano plays, the question is, what water will you drink? And as I make a call, right, I don't know where you are in your life, because the Lord was very patient and gracious to me. I was in church throughout this whole time. And God saw it to not call me out 100%. He was gentle with me. He was working with me. And I don't know where you're at in your life, with your spiritual experience, your religious experience. But the way I see it, Jesus is coming soon. And we know that us sitting on the sideline and getting caught up in this American dream, it's a very subtle thing that's happening. It's almost like the devil's master planned it. He's given us something that kind of anesthetizes the church. And little by little, we're trapped in it. The devil is using it to suck us in and suck our time away from really completely living 100% for God. And God is making that invitation to you tonight. I'm no evangelist, but I'm going to say as we sing this closing song, I surrender all, that if you have said that you would like to have Jesus fill your heart up and that you're willing to allow God to take whatever has a hold of you, as subtle as it is, as good as it is, and you want to surrender to God, I'm going to invite you to come to the front, and I'm going to have a special prayer for you.